On behalf of the Tang Center for Silk Road Studies, as the chair, I want to welcome you all to this celebratory event because today we are celebrating the recipient of the Clancy Fellowship, Khenpo Yeshe. I could talk for hours about how great Khenpo is, Yeshe is. We traveled together to Dunhuang. There are lots of stories, very nice stories, wonderful stories. But to do justice to his work, I invited Professor Alex van Rospat to, as the director of the group in Buddhist Studies and also as a professor in Buddhist Studies, to give you some background on Yeshe and really sort of perhaps contextualize his work that he's doing in the group in Buddhist Studies. So help me welcome Professor Alexander van Rospat.
It's a pleasure to introduce Yeshe, who is an extraordinary student. But before saying a couple words of Yeshe, a big thanks to the funders of the fellowship, to the Clancy family present here. Thank you very much. It's not only that we have Zach thriving in the program. That was a Freudian slip because I was going to talk about Zach Beer in a moment. The previous recipient, Zach, who is here, who's in the process of finalizing a wonderful dissertation. And before Zach, there were other recipients, but I'm thinking particularly about Buddhist studies. Max Brandstedt has profited, and he went on to be a fellow of the Harvard Society, and now is professor in Utah, which is wonderful. And Megan Howard, who was an obvious candidate because of her studies on the Dunhuang archive. Megan first was a postdoc in Yale, and now she is a professor at NYU. So the money invested in fellows like Yeshe and like Zach pays rich returns. Thank you very much. So Yeshe is a very extraordinary colleague. He was trained in Tibet, he grew up in Tibet, but in a young age he felt drawn to seminaries, studying the intricacies of Tibetan philosophy. And eventually he fled from Tibet to Nepal, a story Jay can tell much better than I can do. But he ended up in the Kathmandu Valley, staying at a wonderful place called Parping, which has a kind of retreat center where you're locked up for 3 years and 3 months. It's serious stuff. It's a wonderful place. So Yeshe has been kind of studying there also. And in many ways, Yeshe, you're kind of joining the practice side and the academic side, which doesn't happen so often in our field. And that's why it's a great pleasure to work with Yeshe. He's enormously learned, particularly when it comes to Dzogchen. He's not just learned, but he also knows what one is talking about. When you deal with the intricacies of Dzogchen scholasticism, it's very difficult to wrap your mind around, but not for Yeshe, because he knows what they're talking about. He is in the process of finishing his dissertation in the next year, and he has been teaching for us on a graduate student appointment, Tibetan language, supported by Matteo. Thank you very much again, Matteo. And this has been a great blessing for our Tibet language program. It's not so easy to offer Tibetan language at a university. To get the right enrollments and to basically impart the skills that are useful afterwards, it's a tricky. You have to negotiate between spoken Tibetan, literary Tibetan, different registers of the written language. You've done very well. The Tibetan language program is really thriving. Unfortunately, the current climate that we are all suffering collectively doesn't make it easy to, as Jake and myself had hoped, to turn you into a permanent lecture. But I'm not giving up hope. I'm hoping for better times. And anyway, what you've done for the Tibetan language program is wonderful. So I've been here for more than 20 years. From the get-go, I made it my business to build up Tibetan language instruction. As I said, it's not easy. With you, really, it worked very well. Anyway, Yeshe is a wonderful combination of Tibetan learnedness, of practitioner. He did something that I find really remarkable. He came out of Tibet, difficult routes. He stayed for 3 years, 3 months in retreat, a very peculiar choice, not something easy. He arrived in the States and he embraced the possibilities of Western education. He earned his BA here at Berkeley, and he did so well. Particularly Jake took the lead on, my colleague Jacob Dalton, that there was no hesitation when you applied to the MA program. It's not so easy for Jake and myself to get Buddhist studies people into South and Southeast Asian studies. Often they look at us and say, take them Buddhist studies, we don't have enough slots. But when you applied, everybody immediately agreed. And so it's wonderful that Yeshe is being supported by the fellowship now. Eventually, a package that is granted to students when they join, eventually it kind of exhausts itself, it's used up. So I'm very grateful and very happy that thanks to your generosity, Yeshe continues to thrive here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjo and Alex, for kind introduction. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I would like to thank to the Tang Center for Sacred Studies and Leon Clancy Fellowship for their generous support. I'm especially grateful to Sanjo and Karen and Frank for your kind support and ongoing encouragement. This fellowship has made a meaningful difference in my work. I'm honored to have the opportunity to present some of this research today here. The topic of my talk is titled, At the Cross, the Reception, Rejection, and Retention of Chinese Chan in Tibetan Buddhism. This paper investigates early Tibetan interactions with Chinese Chan Buddhism. For primary textual source, I use materials including Dunhuang manuscripts as well as writings by 12th century Tibetan treasury ruler Derdong Nyalra Nyingma, a late 9th to early 10th century Tibetan Buddhist scholar Nobchen Sangye Yishe, and the 14th century historian Derdong Urgyen Lingpa. The Tibetan imperial period, particularly during the 8th and 10th century, was a time intense in religious negotiations. It was also a time when the Tibetan court engaged in intensive exchanges with China and India. As Tibetan transitioned into Buddhist state, the leaders undertook a careful process of doctrinal selections, choosing teachings that could help facilitate coherent spiritual identity aligned with their socio-political goals. In these contexts, Chinese Chan, despite its initial appeal, soon became a target of scrutiny. Furthermore, socio-political approaches such as the Tibetan strategic positioning between India and China fuel this rejection as the imperial authoritatives sought to define a uniquely Tibetan Buddhist path. I believe that rather than being entirely discarded, different aspects of Chan have been selectively retained and transformed through the process of cultural negotiations and reinterpretations to align with the Tibetan priorities. This ongoing entanglement, I argue, revealed that adaptive capacities of Buddhist tradition. Thus, it invites broader reflections on how religious idea travel, evolves, persists regardless of doctrinal, national, or cultural boundaries. This talk is divided into 3 parts. The first part focuses on Chan's reception, examine various Dunhuang textual sources that reflect both Chan influences and Tibetan indigenous curiosity and experimentation. The second part addressed the rejection, which has 2 aspects. First, the institutional dismissal of Chan by Tibetan court, and the second, a growing academic trend to reject the Zamye debate altogether as historical event. Third part discusses its retention, which although less visible, is equally important. It explores the survival of Chan elements within Tibetan religious traditions. Drawn from Nobchen Sangye Yixie's Land for the Eye of Contemplation and Urgyen Lingpa's testimony of the ministers, we consider the possibility of Chan underground community as well as the depth resonance between Chinese Chan and Tibetan Dzogchen thoughts. Here, I propose a rethinking of Tibetan Chan historiography, not as a narrative of failure or disappearance, but as one of the transformation and convert continuity. From the outset, the Tibetan empirical court engaged with Buddhism as primarily used as instrument of the governance. In building a Buddhist polity, Tibetan rulers took both westward to India and eastward to China, drawing from religious system of both civilizations. These bidirectional engagement catalyzed a period of intense doctrinal syncretization and ideological experimentation. For instance, several Dunhuang manuscripts portray how the early Buddhist teachings that were introduced to Tibet were influenced by Chan tradition from China. 2 manuscripts are dedicated to universal ground of consciousness, or Alaya Vijnana. They are PT 654 and the ITJ 708. Furthermore, ITJ 709 examines the concept of non-conceptual thought, which holds a unique and distinctive meaning in the Dzogchen tradition. The open statement of ITJ 708 explains the universal ground, which reads as follows. In general, it is taught that all phenomena are Buddhas. What are the Buddhas endowed with? That they are endowed with the 3 awakened bodies and 4 gnosis. The cause for the 3 awakened bodies is the 4 gnosis. Since the cause of the 4 gnosis is the 8 collection of consciousness, compounded things produced by cause and conditions are subsumed in these 8 consciousness. And uncompounded things not produced by cause and conditions are subsumed within them. Affliction that successively produce samsara are similarly subsumed. Completely pure phenomena that successively reverse that's nirvana, are also subsumed in these. External phenomena, all matter, and are also subsumed in these. Internal phenomena, i.e., conscious beings, are also subsumed in these. Therefore, now 8 collections of consciousness need to be explained. The concept of universal ground, or the alaya, become increasingly dynamic and multifaceted in centuries, following an introduction into Yogacara thought. It evolved into Dzogchen ground, which is central to the ontology and cosmology of Dzogchen philosophy. Here, I argue that the central teaching delivered through above passages were not only the philosophical or sociological reflections, but also highlights the vibrant historical moment of culture and religious exchange. For instance, the idea of all phenomena are Buddhas can be found in early Buddhist sutras such as Lotus Sutra and Nirvana Sutra, which provide guiding principle for the Chinese Chan. During this early time, the dissemination and proliferation of different Buddhist ideas are much more fluid than the cultural exchange today, because the structure and the system of the Buddhist schools in Tibet were still evolving. These Dunhuang manuscripts illustrate that Tibetans, while encountering the Buddha Dharma through multi-channels, are already engaging creatively with the diverse stance of Buddhism. The Dunhuang region there is at the crossroads of China, Central Asia, and Tibet, serve as a crucial site where teaching from different traditions are translated, interpreted, and synthesized. Manuscripts like PT 654, ITJ 708, and ITJ 709 reveal how Tibetan scribes and scholars not only observed, but also adapted Buddhist doctrine to align with their need and spiritual frameworks. As we will see the next 3 slides, these early periods mark not simply the reception of foreign religious teachings, but also some extent an active and interpretive process in which Tibetan Buddhism begins to take shape. One that integrated elements of Chan thought into that would later develop into uniquely Tibetan religion tradition called Dzogchen. The most scholars traditionally classify Tibetan Chan within Chinese Northern Chan lineage. Evidence from Dunhuang manuscript, ITJ 709, written in Tibetan, challenges this presumption of North and South divide of Chan in Tibet. For example, this manuscript discusses 4 forms of meditation by using Chinese transliteration paired with Tibetan translation, which strongly suggests the Chinese source of considerable significance. Here, the key excerpts from ITJ 709, which directly parallel Chinese fragment from Kelo Senior's 2045. This later text, part of the collection of Sen Hui's saying, critiques the Northern Chan school for meditation thoughts. This Dunhuang manuscript titled Speech of Sen Hui provides the direct critique from the 6th patriarch, Sen Hui, positioning the teaching of the text in a clear position to the Northern Chan practice. These 4 rows illustrate the meditative process as follows. The first row, in the middle column, that's my translation from Tibetan, to retract the mind or focus inwardly. indicates that meditators' initial task to turn their focus inwardly. The second row in the same column, to awaken the mind to rise, shows that awareness emerges as the mind becomes more attentive. This third row, to rest the mind quietly, enter one pointedly, demonstrated the need for the mind to rest in a single-pointed focus. Finally, the fourth row, to abide the mind focus on emptiness, suggests that while abiding naturally, the mind should focus on nature of the emptiness. We can thus infer that there are Tibetan Chan practitioners engaging with Senhui's Sorten school practice in the Dunhuang area. Although we don't know precisely how these teachings reached central Tibet, it is possible that Mohe Yin's teaching followed the Northern school's tradition extended beyond this meditative process. One can see the fluidity and intermingles of Chan movement in Tibet. The so-claimed Chan's northern and southern schools divided in China is not as rigid as found in Tibet. Mohe Yin himself prefers Northern Chan teachings of gradual step presented the more radical alternative to Kamalhila's gradual approach. This doctrinal divided is central theme that allegedly the Zamye debate was too settled. This manuscript indicated that early Tibetan Buddhists had unique and intricate encounter with Chinese Buddhism, particularly Chan tradition. What makes this period too fascinating is that the textual sources from Dunhuang reveal not just a single unified transformation of Chan into Tibet, but rather a range of different schools of Chan teachings being translated into Tibet. This plurality suggests that early Tibetan translators and practitioners engaging with not just a single source, but multiple trends of Chan thought. As a result, it's become quite difficult, if impossible, to identify one of these teachings or doctrine as definitely representative of Mohe Yin or his school. What we see in fluid and dynamic process of interaction, there are elements of Chan's adapted, reinterpreted, and sometimes merge with indigenous Tibetan contemplative frameworks like Dzogchen. In this section, we first look at how ideological political interests are narrated through the Zamye debate event. We pay close attention to how the sudden enlightenment can become contest symbol of the foreign influence. We also study key Tibetan sources, including Nyara Nyingma Dharma Chronicle, to map out how the tension between sudden and gradual paths are both narrate and historical remembrance, and how they are used to reinforce to pro-Indian alignment within the Tibetan Buddhism. I argue that historical dismissal of the Chan teachings being unfit or unorthodox echoed every polemics that our Zamye debate allegedly settled. What impact of Zamye debate is remembered in the mainstream Tibetan history as in some contemporary Western scholars? There is also a trend deny that the debate ever occurred by labeling it as a retrospective invention. In other words, the academic skepticism may, in fact, be conditioned by deeper internalization of the polemical lens, which one might call the collective misremembrance or selective amnesia. As both of these denials reflects privilege or certain lineages and narratives while dismissing other traditions and memories. Whether Samye debate did happen or not, I could not ascertain since I was not there. But their writings in both Tibetan and Chinese about Chan Tibet, narrative of Samye debate from successive generations of Tibetan scholars and representatives of Moghyan. A main character in the Samye story, these material are telling us something Chan-related, indeed happened to the collective mind. By looking at Tibetan Dunhuang manuscripts outline the faults of 4 methods of meditation attributed to the Northern school, it suggests that the Tibetan rejection of Chan might be doctrinally selective. And therefore, rather than categorically dismissing the entire Chan teachings, Tibetans appear to be dissatisfied with only certain aspects of Chan thoughts. Adoption of the terms in Tibetan transliteration like Dönmi or sudden gait and Jianmi or gradual gait is more lexical borrowing. It's revealed that the deeper integration of Chan Buddhist concept into Tibetan intellectual and religious life. These integration concerning the local Buddhist practice and the philosophy was equally politically charged. A key moment of these negotiations marked by arrival of Chan master Hoshang Moghyan, who advocated the non-conceptual sudden path awakening approach sharply contrast with the gradual methodologies promoted by Indian scholars like Chandrakshita and Kamalashila. While sources such as Bashi Puton's Dharma Chronicle and the Blue Annal differ significantly in their retellings, ranging from the Chan sympathetics account in Nyangran Nyima Wizard's Dharma Chronicle to those affirming Kamalashila's decisive victory, the political consequences of these narratives are unmistakable. The Tibetan court endorsed the Indian gradualist model. Thus, ideological tension plays out not only in the doctrinal text, but also in the life experience and political decisions. During the Nyongra's Dharma Chronicle, we can find a vivid account of Tibetan practitioners embracing extreme self-modification in the Chan tradition. It speaks Moghyan's sudden path teaching gained widespread popularity. His followers thought that samsara stems simply from not recognizing one's own nature, and thus a direct realization rather than ritual or the ethical actions was paramount. A verse from Perfection of the Time Sutra captured this Nyanglar's Dharma Chronicle. Proclaim that I do not purify obscuration through the state of the lead beyond the perceiver and perceived, nor I do ponder on the dharmata of non-complexity. As the dharmata of sudden, determined, and gradual Jianmi is the same. If one believes that one's own dualistic thought is a gnosis, that thought becomes an obstacle for meditating on dhyana. Continue. As a result of the Chan popularity, this is from Nyanglar's, religious offerings related practice decline in the region of Zamye and Lhasa, and the virtuous actions rooted in body and speech are no longer observed. However, a few individuals such as Barana, Birotana, and Bapalyang continue to uphold Acharya Bodhisattva's doctrine, which means Chandrakshita. The dispute over views and conduct rose. The king declared These little bit awkward etymologizing because the borrowing Chinese term don't mean then etymologize in Tibetan. It doesn't really work, but that's how here appears. The king declared that the Chinese teaching Dun was not aligned with the true practice of Dharma. Thus the term Dunmi, not Dharma teaching, was accepted by the public. Drawn on the history of the patient sage, Zenmi, who burned his body as an offering. The king emphasized the importance of accumulating merit through compassion for the sentient beings. He asked rhetorically, isn't it burning one's body out of compassion, Ze, Dharma? It's not called compassion, Zemi. Ultimately, the king decreed that one's will and conduct must be in accordance with the teaching of the gradual path, Zewa Minpa. This declaration infuriated those advocated for the sudden approach, the Minpa. I maybe skip a read. Here. Let's continue. This passage illustrated not the depth of doctrinal disagreement between the two camps, but also the intensity of their conviction. As evidenced in this record of public protest, both sides are ready to defend their belief to death. Additionally, from the highlight lines, one can see that Nyangrar foretold that even before Samye debate, King had already claimed that the Chan was not the true Dharma, and that the Tibetans should follow the gradual path teachings. In Wang Xi's account, in his preface to Dongwu Da Cheng Jing Li Jue, he speaks the Zhenpo, commending the Chan master to stop teaching because Brahmin monk, which means Kamalashila or Shandarakshita, Brahmin monk told him that what the Chinese Chan monk taught was not teaching of the golden mouth, which means that they are not the authentic Buddhist teaching. As a result, one of Hoshan's Tibetan followers set his head on fire, while the other stabbed himself to death. 30 other Tibetan monks submitted their protests to king, threatening to disrupt and jump off the cliff. One can see the degree of violence involved in the dissonance between the two polemic camps. After the debate, none of the major participants were left with the favorite account. According to the Mbashi and Putin's Dharma Chronicle, Kamalashila was the winner of the debate, was reported to have been killed by 4 Chinese assassins who came at night and crushed Kamalashila's kidney until he was dead while he's sleeping. Another account by Nyangrar states that it was Kamalashila's attendant, an Indian named Dhanashri, the gold keeper, who killed Kamalashila. Yishi Wangbo and advisors to the king stopped eating and died, according to the Blue Annal. According to the Blue Annal, Komama and other adherents of the Heshang or Hoshang Mahayin are distressed and having smitten their bodies with stones and died as it runs in the tradition. To provide insight into the Chan practitioners, remember the Zamye debate. I have translated a few passages from Dharma Chronicle by Nyangrar. According to the Nyangrar, Kamalashila asked Master Moheyin to deliver his philosophical discourse. Moheyin said, "It is not that I am unaware of karmic cause and effect. If a practitioner is guided by the definitive meaning, this path can be short. Since everything arises from the conceptual mind, depends on whether one has a virtue or non-virtue thoughts. One will engage respondingly in a virtue or non-virtue actions. These will lead one to experience the fruit of the higher and lower realms, wander in the samsara. However, whoever refrains from any conceptualization or thoughts will be liberated from samsara. For ministers or for the kin faculties, with sharp faculties, purify mind, virtues, non-virtues like a white and black cloud equally obscure the sun. Both virtue and non-virtue obscures the mind. Without thinking, conceptualizing, or engaging anything whatsoever, one realizes non-perceivable objects. It's like a Garuda soaring through the sky. This is the descendant teaching, the sudden approach akin to the realization of the 10th Bhumi. Continue. Upon hearing Mohinyan's speech, Acharya Kamalashila replied, "It's not that I fail to understand the genuine meaning of the abiding reality. However, the Buddha's teachings are designed to the followers who need to be guided gradually along the path. When you claim that nothing whatsoever should be conceptualized, you are effectively rejecting analytical wisdom. Since the root of genuine wisdom is analytical wisdom, abandoning it also means abandoning transcendental wisdom. Without analytical wisdom, how can any yogin abide in a non-conceptual state? Without recollection or conceptualization, how could one recall past life or attain omniscience? How could one overcome affliction? Therefore, a yogin would truly realize the meaning of genuine wisdom, realize that 3 times, and both the external and internal are empty. Through this realization, conceptual thoughts are completely pacified, and erroneous views are abandoned. By receiving this teaching, one develops skills, means, wisdoms to purify all obscurations and therefore attain all the dharmas of the Buddha." Did I miss that part? I think I didn't turn. Okay. Having finished delivering this argument, Kamalashila continues, "Your analogy and meaning are both incorrect. First of all, the example you give is not correct. 1, the Garuda with the developed wings and feathers is not suddenly born in the sky and land on a tree. 2, the Garuda is first born in a cliff or somewhere and then grows its wings and feathers slowly and then lands on a tree. The former will not happen, the latter is an example of the gradual." The king then asked Mohinyan if he had an answer. Mohinyan said, "I don't have anything better to add to what I have already said." In sum, the Chan practitioners remember the Zamye debate as it reached the compromise in a dharmic way. Nevertheless, the Chinese side of the story was never told until Dunhuang manuscript was revealed from the hidden cave library. That is now when 动物大成经累诀 English is the correct doctrine of Mao Huiyan's sudden realization. These Chinese manuscripts, there is a letter from Mao Huiyan to King Chizong Detsen. In the letter, Mao Huiyan explains how he went to Lhasa and under the invitation of the King Chizong Detsen and the reason he preached Chan. This passage shows that according to Mo He-yen, King Chosong Detsen thoroughly requires about Chan, inquiry about Chan. When making this speech, Mo He-yen could be trying to establish the Tibetan had pre-existing interest in the Chan before arriving there. He could be, in other words, promoting Chan or his lineage. However, based on what Mo He-yen here, we see that the king seems to care about Buddhism enough that he was willing to dedicate much time to learning about Chan. After diligently investigating this tradition, the king appears open-minded to making Chan available to his people. While there is no way to ascertain how king personally felt about Chan compared to Indian school teachings, it is apparent that that Chan practitioners remember that the king remembers Chan as authentic Dharma until they are provoked by the Ba-clan to perform self-destruction actions. Through the description of their ideological struggles, as seen on the paper, we could perceive perhaps an ideological struggle within the collective mind. The choice between sudden and gradual camps was made with political survival and thriving of the Tibetan state in mind. The narratives of the debate of Chan in subsequent Tibetan Buddhist teachings hint at how Tibetans cherish some aspect of Chan teachings and their tension to perceive them less prominent ways. Due to this scarcity of the contemporary sources, our understanding of early Tibetan Buddhism is limited. Much of what we know comes from later sources, often offer retrospective interpretations. In this section, I examine one of the earliest and most significant texts of Tibetan Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhist Nopchen Sangye Yishi's The Lamp for the Eye of Contemplation, which provides crucial insight into the Chan's lasting presence in the doctrinal and political landscape of Tibet. This is Nopchen's. This is manuscript we found. This is another manuscript. Unlike many other texts describes Chan's disappearing after the Samye debate, Nopchen highlights Chan's lingering influence in Tibet. In The Lamp for the Eye of Contemplation, an entire chapter is dedicated to Chan, citing 34 Chinese and numerous Tibetan Chan teachers, including Hersham Mo He-yen, encapsulating key lineages, positioning Chan within a broader synthesis of meditative system. Nopchen writes, at the time when the Blessed One passed into Nirvana, the causal vehicle was transmitted to Kashyapa. From there, the lineage continues through the Dharmodara, or the Bodhidharma, and others, passing through 7 Chinese masters, finally reaching the Hersham Mo He-yen. In Tibet, the lineage uphold by kings and monks had been lost, but one should cut doubt through their Mo He-yens and other Chinese teachers, Chan teachers, extended philosophical texts and gradual training teachings by Kamalashilas and others. According to Nopchen, the Chan lineage begins with the Buddha's pass through the figures like Bodhidharma and 7 Chinese masters, culminating the Hersham Mo He-yen, who transmitted into Tibet. Although Nobchen acknowledged that the former transmission upheld by kings and monks are lost. He urged readers to resolve doubt by consulting extended Chan texts and the gradual teachings of Kamalahila, both of which play a central role in the Samye debate. During Nobchen's time, person-to-person Chan transmission had diminished, likely as one of the outcomes of Samye debate. However, in his work, Nobchen does not treat Chan as obsolete. Instead, he affirms its lasting impact on Tibetan Buddhism by highlighting its investigation into Mahayoga and Adiyoga practice, particularly through non-conceptual method and pit instruction. 5 centuries later, Urgyen Lingpa's Testament of Ministers tells similar story of the Chan lineage as the Nobchen's lamp for the eye of contemplation. In the Testament of the Minister still, or Lombo Katan, Urgyen Lingpa writes, at the time of the blessed ones pass into nirvana, through final increase into Dharma, all doubts are dispelled. These treatises on passing into nirvana was expounded with numerous examples and meanings directly addressed to the Kashyapa. Thereafter, from Dharmottara onwards, the lineage of 7 Chinese teachers reached its conclusion, culminating in Heshang Moheyan himself. This is the sudden approach of Kashyapa, aligned with the Mahasamgika school. Maybe I just let you to read. These 2 passages from the Testament of Ministers reveal how Tibetans understood the remembered the Chan lineage. Both Nobchen and Urgyen Lingpa use phrase, the oral transmission of pit instruction, where there is nothing to be done. However, they use the phrases in strikingly different ways. Nobchen applies it to Adiyoga or Dzogchen, whereas Urgyen Lingpa places it within the Chan tradition. This suggests that Urgyen Lingpa might have been influenced by Nobchen's work, but also impossible that the Chan passages in the Testament, which Urgyen Lingpa transmitted, comes from as early source. These raise the intriguing possibility of alternative history in which Chan stays in the Tibet long after debate. The writings of Nobchen and Urgyen Lingpa implies that a line to alleged decline of Chan might have been facilitated through the mainstream historiography that privileges the gradual approach. It is possible that instead of diminishing, Chan simply went underground and was grabbed onto local traditions such as Dzogchen or other forms of practice. These convergences and discrepancies offer critical insight into presence of Chan thoughts in Tibet. They show how later figures like Urgyen Lingpa did not simply inherit but actively rework early materials and integrate them into evolving frameworks like Dzogchen. More broadly, this reflects the fluidity of textual transmission. It also shows how Buddhist traditions strategically constructed their legitimacy through selective remembrance and adaptation. Despite the transitional decline of Chan, its contemplative method and pit instruction endures, subtly refracted through tradition like Dzogchen, which we may have observed and interpreted Chan insight as part of on doctrinal evolution. While Chan institutions decline in Tibet, Dzogchen emerged with the Nyingma tradition as a resilient and powerful contemplative system, emphasizing direct realization, non-conceptual meditation, and sudden awakening. Dzogchen shares striking affinities with Chinese Chan. Yet, unlike Chan, Dzogchen offers intensive tantric methods that guide practitioners gradually toward realization and embedded with the tantric cosmology and ritual frameworks in integration that has embedded in institutional survival and flourishing. It is important to understand that the gradual approach in Dzogchen differed from gradual approach taught by Indian school and Kamalashila. In fact, the step-by-step practice guide by Dzogchen are termed sudden approach because according to Dzogchen's own tradition, practice them significantly shorten the time required to reach enlightenment compared to the gradual approach of the Indian school. In the Lamp for the Eye of Contemplation, Nobchen Sangye Yishe explicitly situates the Dzogchen within the discourse of sudden enlightenment. He writes, here, the sudden approach passes or superior to the Zhenmi or the gradual path in 10 aspects. 1, the area of skillful means. 2, the area of the method of entering. 3, the area of conduct. 4, area of Dingyanzi or Samadhi. 5, the area of rectifying conceptual thoughts. 6, the area of purifying obscuration. 7, area of accomplishment. 8, the area of accumulation. 9, area of realization. And 10, the area of benefiting beings. So it is superior in these 10 aspects, he said. Yeah, I'd like you to read this one as well. Nobchen not only elevated the sudden path above gradualism, but also explicitly draw the parallel between Chan's sudden approach to the moon and the Greek perfection, or Dzogchen. These concerns that the two might be confused led him to compose a dedicated chapter on this topic. This demonstrates that the conscious effort to differentiate Dzogchen from Chan, even while acknowledging their methodological convergence. At the same time, the memory of Hoshang Mohe-yen, the key advocate of the sudden path in Tibet, was never erased. This depiction in the 20th century Thangka painting testifies to his enduring resonance with Tibetan Buddhist memory. Mohe-yen's visually enshrine his presence and symbol of the historical Chan-Tibetan encounter and its legacy. These remembers the further enact in Cham, or Lama dance, one of the most secret and celebrated annual events in the Tibetan religious culture. This dance blended spiritual offerings, cosmological enactment, and communal purification. Strikingly, Hoshang Mohe-yen leads every one of ritual dance in Tibet and beyond. His roles reaffirmed through the performance. His central place in these dances serve as a ritual presence integrated into life texture of Tibetan religious life. Conclusion. In conclusion, the history of Chinese Chan in Tibet is far more intricate than standard narrative of rejection suggests. As we have seen, early Tibetan Buddhism engaged deeply with Chan. The initial reception was marked by openness and doctrinal curiosity, as reflected in the Dunhuang manuscript and early Tibetan writings. The subsequent rejection of Chan seems to be less of the theological verdict and more of political strategy. In other words, whether the Zamya debate happened or not, through the multifaceted narrative of this debate, we can see the meaningful engagement with Chan's teaching did occur in the scholastic discourses and the collective mind. Even though the Indian school prevails as a Tibetan state religion, this decision did not erase Chan altogether from Tibetan memory. Instead, Chan persists textually in the writings of Nobchen Sangye Yixie and Urjian Lingpa, ritually and enduring practice of the Thangka paintings and Lama dance, and philosophically in the parallel method of sudden realization found within Dzogchen. What emerged from this study is not simply reassessment of Tibetan Chan, but broader reflection on how Buddhist traditions evolve through cross-culture encounters and within the context of layered geopolitical tensions. The conversations between sudden and gradual enlightenment are not footnotes in the Tibetan history, but crucible through which doctrinal, institutional, and cultural choice had been made. These choices have reverberated across centuries, shaping the contour of Tibetan Buddhist thoughts and identity. By revising these conversations through archival manuscripts, hagiography, ritual practice, and philosophical discourses, we gain a more nuanced view of Tibet's early religious landscape. Doctrinal transmission is never linear, but always negotiated, reinterpreted, and remembered anew.
Let me ask a brief question. Yeah. So you had the 10 different points in which the subteists are superior to the gradualists.
Yeah.
Yes, this one.
Uh-huh.
Isn't there a sense of somehow, couldn't one argue that these 10 things are kind of one after another, that there's a certain gradualism built into the list of 10?
Yeah, I think that's why...
I mean, it culminates in benefiting beings. It looks to me like superior what precedes.
I think it's not saying the gradualist doesn't have this 10. So these 10 areas that they're doing better, or they're equipped with benefiting more beings rather than they're saying the gradualists.
Yeah, I got this. It just struck me that there's a hierarchy built into it, progression, that you start out with skillful means, and you end up in perfecting, benefiting beings. So looking at the list, I can't help feeling that the idea of progression has been completely given up. Maybe it doesn't make sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think it's sort of giving up, but then need to which areas they are superior to or better, because these the Nobchen's writing is the sudden approach is superior to this gradual approach. That's he used Kamala Shila's. So view and conducts are lower than Mohayan's. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the idea that there could have been Chan groups going underground around after the Samye debate and influencing the development of Dzogchen. But isn't it kind of, I mean, it's hard to really make a claim like that. I mean, insofar as like, if you say that like the language of sudden enlightenment could be an indication of Chan influence, I mean, as you're pointing out as well, like, you know, you have Tathagata doctrine and a lot of other things coming from the other forms of Buddhism that the Tibetans are receiving. It seems equally possible that people could be engaging with those doctrines and you know, creating a doctrine of sudden enlightenment separate from Chan Buddhism. So, like, how could we exactly even come to talk about Chan influence on Dzogchen, or doesn't it get quite tricky?
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's, I think, a little bit difficult to, of course, pinpoint any of these events, but I'm not really saying the Chan teachers went through underground to promoting their teachings. Somehow, Nobchen already said that the person-to-person lineages already sort of die out. He still say you need to resolve doubt from these Chan texts. And then, of course, Chan itself is more talking about Sutric-based teachings, and hard to say there's no Chan elements in a Dzogchen or anywhere. But sudden approach itself is that is compared to this comparison is we could say Dzogchen is sudden approach, but then Chan is also sudden approach. I think that sudden approach term itself really reflects the Chan and Dzogchen relationship, but there is a certain we have this one, yeah, the oral transmission of the pit instruction, where there is nothing to be done. So this seems to me is more either Dzogchen, or then you can see here Nobchen. This it talks about the Adiyoga or Dzogchen, but it comes to Urgyen Lingpa, this is look like the same phrase used as a Chan. This talks about Chan. So these kind of maybe phrases or some that both can employ in their practice. And then we don't really know how much Chan teachings comes to in the Dzogchen, but seems to there is Tibetans are doing this. But if we look at the Chan text, Chan's, then it's there's many similarities in the Chan text and the Tibetan Dzogchen.
Yeshi, piggybacking on the question,
Yeah.
couldn't one make the argument it's not just about survival under group of certain groups favoring the kind of non-gradual approach? Couldn't one argue that in the history of Buddhism there are different currents? Even when I'm thinking of the Indian tradition, there are currents which emphasize the gradual nature of the path, and there are some currents which actually emphasize the idea of instantaneous awakening. So the fact that this survives in the Tibetan tradition makes sense to me. I wonder whether it really has to mean that the survival of Bashan ideas.
Yeah, the Hashan idea is, I think, it's not really different idea from Buddhist ideas. Because there is, they call Dodeji Chukong, the citation of 80 sutras. So they are mainly talks about the sutras. Yeah, that's I think it's not that really different.
Dr. Yeshela, thank you for your excellent and insightful talk. It was excellent. I'm just wondering, the endearing slide of Mohayan in the Chom dance with the beaming smile was just wonderful. I'm wondering, I'm assuming that it was, these dances were created after perhaps the reign of King Tri Songdatsen. I'm just curious when the dances first came about, that one. So there it highlights and epitomizes your idea of negotiation, reinterpretation, and remembrance. So when did these Chom dances with Mohayan, with the smile, first appear in Tibet?
That's also, I really don't know. That's a good question. When the Cham dance start, usually these rituals, subjugation and so forth, in Tibet, we see the Tibetans build monastery or temple or stupa. They do these kind of subjugation dance. I think allegedly they say when Samyit monastery was built, they would do that. But the rituals are very much, everything's tantric dance, the mass and the clothes and the dance. But I don't really know. But other Tibetan sources, I would say, fragmented sources, since these Hersans or the Chinese monks interact with Tibetans way before Trisong Detsen. So they ask sort of divinations and they do all kind of so dharmically get advice from Hersans. So that's the case. I was thinking Tibetan culture is already sort of interacting with Chinese Buddhist monks way before 8th century. I mean, way before Samye monastery was built.
Thank you very much, Yeshi. I didn't stress this before. The literature of Dzogchen is enormous. Nobody in the Western world, neither Jake nor David Germano, none of the people could study all of this stuff. The only one who can do it. No, really true. It's so much. It's so difficult. And it's wonderful you do it. Thank you again for giving Yeshi another year to allow to do this. It needs time. Thank you, Yeshi.